Welcome, everybody. It's just wonderful to see you again. This is the Christmas month, and we all take a deep breath, at least. I did when I was decorating the Christmas tree and thinking, okay, let's read a few books and talk about them. And as usual, I have to remember, and I'm getting better at this, we are made possible with support from Scandesign Foundation, Danish American Heritage Society, and the University of Washington, Scandinavian Studies Department. And then we are also a collaboration of the Museum of Danish America, Northwest Danish Association, and of course me, I mentioned first, and Desiree Orbeck, who did the interview. And I sincerely hope you saw the interview. If not, please visit it and see what she says. She's quite a quirky character, I guess, is how I've characterized the author. Very, very funny, very interesting. And finally, we also have promotional partners, including the National Foundation for Danish America, Elverhøj Museum in Solvang, and the National Nordic Museum. And having said that, I would actually like to start today just playing the teacher a little bit, but I wanted to share with you something about Grundtvig and the Danish folk high schools. And that's also because one of you said, I don't really know anything about that. So I prepared a little sharing screen here about Grundtvig and the Danish folk high schools. And I hope you'll enjoy it. And please ask, stop me if I'm saying something that is totally weird, because it's just it's a 10 picture here PowerPoint. So I'll just run through it. But I want you to know this because it's such an important part of Danish culture, Danish history, Danish religion, Danish hymn writing, etc., etc. So the man in question is called Nikolaj Frederik Severin Grundtvig. And I actually have a girlfriend whose son changed his name to Severin out of respect for Grundtvig. So he's definitely respected among musicians. 1783, as you can see, to 1872, had quite a long life and a long list of accomplishments. Pastor, just a minister, parish priest, author, poet, educator, philosopher, historian, teacher, philologist, and politician. I'm not going to talk about that. He was called the ideological father of the folk high school that we're reading about in this book. And his followers became known as Grundtvigians, adhering to the philosophy of Grundtvigianism. In Danish, it's easier to say Grundtvigianisme and Grundtvigianer. But when you translate it, it turns into this kind of Grundtvigianism. In Denmark, there's a folk high school songbook, and everybody knows it. It's blue, and it has been in existence for as long as I know. And you use it in elementary schools, and you use it in every school. Whenever you want to sing something, you go to that. And he's the most represented poet. If you've seen the interview, you'll know that our author has 4 songs in this book. So it's being rejuvenated and more or less improved all the time. So famous rock singers in Denmark can also have their songs in this very popular folk high school songbook. He also is the most represented in the Danish hymn book, which is being used in the state church, the Danish Lutheran state church. So he is, like I said, a very accomplished person. Married 3 times, 5 children. His first 2 wives died, and the third one survived him. And the 5 children, of course, was an effect of that. The Danish Golden Age was the first half of the 19th century. Some of you may know that term. Just prosperous age for art, literature, philosophy. And this man, Grundtvig, was born in Vordingborg, in Udby, and it's south of Copenhagen, the southern part of Sjælland, in a very religious atmosphere, but including also Old Norse legends and traditions. He studied theology in Copenhagen after graduating, and he was very ambitious at that time, wanted to be an author, not really a priest or a pastor. Then came a huge change. He became a tutor, a private tutor. This sounds kind of Bronte-ish, like Charlotte Bronte, but it's the same thing. Private tutor at a manor house. He fell in love head over heels with the lady of the house, who was quite a bit older than he was, and he wrote numerous poems to her. And this was during the time of what's called the Danish national consciousness. You have to think about what happened in the 19th century with the wars in Germany, wars against Germany, 1849 that Denmark won, 1864 that Denmark lost, and the beginning of the century where Romanticism was inaugurated with Henrik Steffens, who actually was Grundtvig's cousin, and Adam Oehlenschläger with his poems from 1803. Nordic history, Icelandic sagas, a heavy part of this, and Grundtvig fell headlong into all these debates. But he had several crises during his life, and he was also hospitalized in what was then called mental asylums. So he had mental issues, and he was labeled insane during periods of his life, always recovered. Just so you need to know. I think today we would have said bipolar. Periods of excessive energy, and then periods of depression and lack of energy. So that's usually what the diagnosis is today. So when his father, who was a pastor, was aging, Grundtvig was asked to be his chaplain, and he said, no, I really wanted to be an author. He held the obligatory sermon, and he was attacking the Danish state church, was severely reprimanded, and that's when he had his first bout of mental. But he recovered and wrote the most popular Danish Christmas song, Dejlig er den himmel blå, lovely is the blue sky, which is sung in every elementary school and every school in Denmark around Christmas time. Everybody knows it. And then he felt that he was awakened from this hubris of being the most wonderful author in the world. He gave up his ambition and became a strong Lutheran pastor. And if you look at his, I mean, you can read about him, of course, but if you look at his accomplishments, they are astonishing. He was not accepted as his father's successor as a priest because he was too controversial. He was just always stirring the pot and making people think. He said in 1815, I'm not giving any more sermons in various churches. I want my own parish. And he managed to get that later on. But before that, he had a bout with the censorship in Denmark. He was writing stuff that was deemed to be libel. And he was actually sentenced to be censored for life. Now, the history at the same time, I just wanted you to know that Denmark and Norway separated in 1815 following the Napoleonic Wars, but he also went into history by translating the oldest Danish history, written by Saxo Grammaticus, the Gesta Danorum, the habits and customs of the Danes. He translated Beowulf, the first one to do that. And in 1826, when they were celebrating 1,000 years of Christianity in Denmark, he wrote tons of hymns, and the term Grundtvigian that I said was introduced. He was a close friend of the king and the queen, crown prince, crown princess, went to England 3 times. Think about that in the 19th century. Traveling was not easy. He did it. So he wanted to combine the monarchy. He was definitely a royalist, but he wanted to combine the monarchy with a popular voice, which happened in 1849 when Denmark got its first constitution, and the king kind of stepped back and said, I want to sleep in. In 1837, his censorship was repealed, so he could actually write freely, and he gave public lectures, became incredibly popular, and the crown princess, who later became queen, supported him in every endeavor. Finally, he got his church. He became a pastor in Copenhagen, and that was 1839 till his death. He started writing about education, and now we're getting closer to the folk high school. Skolen for livet. This was his main tenet. School has to be for life. Never stop learning. Never stop developing and educating yourself. And that's, of course, nationalism. He shaped Danish national and Christian self-perception, say, from the mid-1830s. And look at it. He wrote more than 1,500 hymns. This man was, when he was in his manic periods, he was a genius. And this is very important. It's happy Christianity, because the other side in Denmark were the Pietists and the Intermission, which believed, and both those congregations believed that entertainment should be banished. You should not dance, you should not smile, you should not do anything fun, because life was only like the anteroom to real life, which would be found after death. Grundtvig said, no, we're living right now. Let's be happy. Let's enjoy ourselves. And first and foremost, let's learn, let's educate, let's share. So popular, you see, popular spirit, building this Danish self-perception. He was also interested in folk songs, and his son actually collected a number of folk songs in Denmark and became famous for that. And now we are at the folk high school, because that was the product of his thoughts. He worked as a teacher several times. He knew what it was to be a teacher, private teacher, manor teacher, tutor. And he said that education should not be based on books, but the spoken living word. So you should talk to people, you should get them to read and think for themselves. And it should be history, poetry, literature for life. And here we are. He is such a forerunner for inclusivity, equity, diversity. Everybody. And you know those catchphrases. They're also in the UN sustainability goals. We need that. And he said, sure, that's what it should be. Everybody, the poor as well as the rich. The first folk high school opens in Rødding in 1844. And if you want to see something, there is actually a YouTube. When in 1944, they produced a half-hour documentary about the Danish folk high school. And I will share this PowerPoint with you so that you know it. So you have that link. What is a folk high school? It's a school where you live. It's kind of a boarding school. You choose your classes, no exams. You learn what you want to learn, no prerequisites. You have to be 17 and a half, but you can stay for long or you can stay for short stays. It's up to you. Can you afford it? Yes, because it's subsidized by the state. You can go in depth. And if you look, you can look it up, more than 200 different topics. You meet a lot of new people, you live with them, and you participate in everything, your life. You have to be 17 and a half to go to the general school, the youth schools, that's 16 for youngsters. But you have some high schools that are specializing in one topic, gymnastics, sports, and physical education, Christian, spiritual, lifestyle schools, schools for seniors. And you can go in the summer and do 1 week or 2 weeks with other seniors. For example, I was checking out the pilgrim route where you just wander around Denmark and walk every day, you know, like 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers, and explore. So anything. Most are general and Grundtvigian. He just founded this movement. You pay for a stay, but it's subsidized. And there you have it. Purpose, life education, popular enlightenment, democratic education for all, inclusivity, equity, diversity. There you go. So that's where we are. And let's move quickly into our discussion. I wanted to read 2 sections as usual. Just because they can't see you, that doesn't mean that you're invisible. And I wanted to use that quote from page 44 in my book because it links to our talk about invisibility last time. She's writing and advising in her letterbox a woman who says, what can I do with my boyfriend? And she's saying, you may think above and beyond yourself. And the other one is also about that. The better you know what you're looking for, the harder it is to find. So she's also using that about relationships. If you know exactly what kind of person you're looking for, not only are you excluding all the others, you're also probably not finding just that right piece of the puzzle. So, having said that, I want to invite you all. What do you think? I mean, is she right? Is she wrong? What do you think of her book? Where would you like to start? And of course, now you know something about the folk high school, you know where she is. She's in Villing. And it's really hard when she said, "Vi vil i Villing." It sounds really good in Danish, "Vi vil i Villing." And then he translated it to "we want in Villing." And I thought, not quite the same power. I would have said "we will in Villing" because that's closer. But anyway, out on the West Coast, as far out as you can get, looking at the sunsets and the oceans, that's where she is. Talk to me. Are we invisible? Should we look for the right person? Those were just kind of the starting points. And anybody?
I'll just respond to the quote. I had written down that quote myself as one that I really, really liked, and it was very thought-provoking. And as you say, it's broad, I think, in the scope, in the sense that it could certainly be about relationships. And in the interview that Desiree did, I think there was either she or Stine was talking about online dating, and so tying that to that. But it's also, I think, so broadly interesting in the sense of just life. Like, what are you looking for in life? And if you're 18, and maybe it ties into the schools too, because if you're 18 and you want to be a lawyer and it's just this narrow vision of what you're looking for, you may close off all the opportunities that otherwise might present. So I think it's a tension between not saying this is exactly what I want, having some goals certainly, but just being open to the universe interacting with you.
Yeah, I don't think you can really know what you want unless you experience other things. As you say, unless you're open to things, how can you really know what you want? You might think you know what you want, but you don't have the information to know what you need. So, and you have to adjust what you want to what you need. I think that's a life lesson.
But Susan, it's also, do you see how it ties up with what you're saying, ties up with that whole purpose of the folk high school? You have to explore, right? You have to not be rigidly slotted into one kind of education or one kind of just this is my goal because my mom and dad want me to make money and be a lawyer or whatever. Maybe you find something different. And I think that is really important. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's such a wonderful system. I wish we had something like that. I think it would open people's minds up more.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and the funny thing to me is that it's based on religion, that he was a very religious man and a very Lutheran man, and yet what he saw was above and beyond religion, just what do people need to create a popular feeling of togetherness. And again, I know Denmark is tiny, 5.6 million, right? But managing that feeling of, oh, we can all go to a folk high school, oh, we can all manage to do that. I think that's quite an accomplishment. Sandra, were you going to say something? Sorry.
No.
Okay, it's when your little light comes on. And then,
Yeah.
Well, I think what we're talking about, though, a lot of it depends on living in a country like Denmark. The possibilities that are open to people are so much greater than the possibilities, I think, open to people in the United States as far as choices. I talked to my cousins when they would first come here, or I would go there, and they'd say, "What's the matter with you? You have a job with 2 weeks of vacation? That's insane. You should get a different job." There are no other jobs. I mean, I'm lucky I have 2 weeks of vacation.
Yeah.
I can't do anything about that. But in Denmark, you have financial support. You can go to school. You can choose what, kind of an education you want if you, I guess, pass exams or whatever. But there's a lot more freedom to live the lifestyle that Grundtvig talked about.
Yeah.
So, well, we can say, wouldn't it be great if that was here? There would have to be a lot of changes before that could be here.
But and
People-
then who would want to pay taxes? 45% taxes. And remember,
What I would if I could get what my cousins had.
Exactly.
When we sat down and talked about taxes, when I talked about our sales tax, our property tax, our state tax, our city tax, our federal tax, I'm not that far away from what my cousins are paying.
And what you pay for medical insurance too.
Right. Right.
You have to, as it
And
turns out,
school.
we pay more.
And yeah.
Yeah, we pay more actually than people who pay 45% in taxes. We actually end up, if you sit down with the dollar amounts, we pay more in the United States and get less.
Yes. Yes.
and she says several times, I'm a socialist. I love paying taxes. And I can recognize that because I have 5 kids. When you have 5 kids, you really use the system and you benefit from the system. And another thing that I don't know if you can relate to, but I totally related to the daycare mother, the daycare person. She was so recognizable to me because I had the most wonderful daycare person. She took care of 4 of my 5 kids. And one of my kids didn't want to go to kindergarten. She said, I'm going to stay here till I start school because she loved it so much. And she was a substitute mother. And I was amazed at her description of how this Mightwit just manages everything. Because that's also my impression of the Danish daycare system. Okay, they can do everything, they can bake rolls and they can fold the laundry and they can, do whatever they have to do while taking care of the kids and everybody's happy and nobody's fighting. Ooh, how do you do that? So anyway, Susanna, sorry.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing, having that daycare available. But I just wanted to point out, I thought one of the most touching passages and descriptions I love Stine's style of writing. And one of the best things for me was when she was talking about one of the little girls who was leaving daycare and getting ready to go to whatever the next is, preschool or something like that. And she talked about how she would not remember, and she couldn't actually conceive of the fact that May Britt would not be in the new place too. She didn't have the knowledge yet. And the way she was able to see that through the child's eyes was really wonderful. I think I also saw the interview, and quirky is a really good word for her. And yet she had that wonderful ability to see through a child's eyes. And I think she's also very good at seeing through the eyes of people who are older than she is herself now too. And I think that's pretty extraordinary. I liked her writing.
Yeah, she's a wonderful observer.
Yeah.
She's got very, very many metaphors, very, very, she's so graphic in her writing, right? You can visualize it all. To me, that was important. It came to life because she was looking at the sunset. And I actually like that. I don't know if you noticed, did you notice I'll just turn this on again. Did you notice the very beginning of the book where she says, I like that a lot. She says, the sunset over the North Sea is looking at us with its red eye. That's on the very first page. Normally you'd say, we are watching the sunset, right? Here. She turned it around and I thought, oh, this bodes well because her language is innovative in a lot of ways. And she presents us with so many scenarios that we can fall into them and say, okay, that's true. You can also view things from the other perspective, from the other side. And that's what you were saying, Suzanne, that she sees it through the eyes of a child, through the eyes of older people, through the eyes of the students who are younger at the school and are longing for her husband's attention and so on. She's really good at that. Anybody else think about her writing and wanted to? Yes, Stephen. Oh, Stephen, we still can't hear you. Did you test your microphone? Annette?
Well, I found her writing difficult to read and easy to read. I guess I think it was both. The punctuation caused me a lot of stopping and starting as I was reading the book. So I would read it and then I'd have to go back and read that sentence again because there seemed to be commas everywhere. But she's in love with commas and periods and no other punctuation, which I found made it a little difficult reading. And so I tried to understand why the punctuation like this. I didn't come up with a good answer other than it did force me to many times go back and read sentences more than once. And I think that in this book, there are a lot of sentences you need to read more than once because they have multiple, they take you in multiple directions. They might raise different feelings each time you read it, some other part of that sentence. They're fairly long in many cases, which is kind of usual because it's the land of short sentences, but with all these commas in, they kind of go on for a little bit. They kind of run, I guess I would have marked them as run-on sentences when I was teaching English. But I wonder what anybody else thought about that. Why does she punctuate it like this? What was
very interesting because I didn't notice till you just mentioned it that she doesn't use quotation marks.
No,
I never
commas and
noticed
period.
that. I never noticed that till you said that. That's amazing. Because usually I don't like writing where there's a lack of punctuation, but I loved her writing. So that, wow.
Yeah.
It
You're
was
right.
in-
She should have added semicolons. Stephen said very much stream of consciousness. Good suggestion. Tova?
Well, I was thinking if you read this out loud, you wouldn't notice the lack of punctuation or paragraph indentation. And so that kind of first person voice, I think it really reads like a voice. You just kind of have to flow into that verbal kind of related to stream of consciousness, but the commas give you just enough of where to pause. So I think if you read it out loud, you wouldn't notice it.
And
I
I was going to say, Cynthia, I didn't even notice it because everybody who writes right now and who comes from the author school in Copenhagen, they write in this way.
Interesting. I was just going to add that in the interview, she said she writes often when she first wakes up. And I had written down, she says, I write early when I'm confused and very sleepy. So I think that's in line with the stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
I didn't mind the lack of punctuation, but the incredibly long paragraphs did drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Flow so beautifully. So I don't know.
yeah, and I should ask, maybe I should have started out. Did you find it funny?
Oh, yes.
Yes. I saw that some reviewer described it as a parody, and I wouldn't have picked that word. I didn't find it a parody at all. I found it actually very believable. I could see these interactions happening. I found the characters, I've found them believable. And so I didn't really see it through the lens of parody at all. It was just finding the humor in being unmoored a bit and kind of finding your way in an unfamiliar community.
And that's a great segue. What is the book about? Did you, and you, Cynthia, you after viewing the interview, I think this book is autobiographical. Yes, because she did move out, Stephen. I mean, she did move out west. Okay, tiny tangent. I moved out west not quite that far, middle of Jutland. Jutland juts up right from Germany. I moved to the middle, but the dialect was so strong that sometimes people said something and I thought, are you speaking Danish? Then you go out west and you can't understand it unless you're born there. I lived for 18 years in Bjerringbro and I was still considered a newcomer. All right. So yes, that tiny community, right? It's difficult. It's difficult to be accepted. How do you feel that she's going about understanding it? I mean, hence the title of the book. Did you relate to that? And you know, one of my questions was, I had to learn when I moved here for good that when people say, how are you? They really don't want to hear your life story. And she had to learn that, right? Her husband and Anas Aga said, nobody's interested in you. Just do all these cliches. Oh yeah, you were okay with that. If you want to have a dog, get a Labrador, then you know what you got, you know, that kind of thing. And today it's Monday. Yeah, not so bad. So how did you feel about that? Was that recognizable to you?
Yes, I lived in New York most of my life. I spent a year in Phoenix, Arizona. And when I went to work every morning, the guy who sold me coffee would say, hi, how are you today? And I would just like, you know, in New York, it's like, why are you writing a book? Why do you want to have it? But, you know, you just kind of say, So one day I walked in, he said, hi, how are you today? And I said, lousy. And he said, oh, good, which was, you know, if I said I was fine, you know, but so it's like, I never went in there again, actually. So.
No, you're expected to say that you're fine, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about the way she goes about it? She actually gets a tutor, Anas Aga, and he's practicing the vacuum. And that's why, you know, I was asking you about that horror vacuuming, the fear of not saying anything. We could do an exercise here where I could time it and we could all sit and stare at each other for a minute. How would that feel, right? Do you know that feeling? We can't have silence. Linda, you're saying yes. Why is that?
Well, when I taught at the university, I at one point decided I called on students, and I called on a student that was from an Asian culture, and I just stopped the whole class until 10 minutes later she answered, because she was not, you know, she was reticent. And also it was very cross-cultural. So I just, and plus, you know, being a Quaker meeting, I'm used to extended silence. I found this book very interesting. The way it was put together was like a diary. It was like Ann Landers or like Cheryl Strayed, who wrote Wild. She also did this kind of letterbox thing. And I thought her answers were really excellent. And also this book gave me Anders Eggers. I if nothing else, reading that book was fabulous, because now I go into all his documentaries and they're great. And I want to ask you, Nita, why? I mean, every time I watch Danish television, the subtitles are in Danish. Is that because they're watching it in Jutland?
That's interesting.
No, it's because they are
Hearing
very
impaired.
concerned. They're very concerned about the elderly and the hard of hearing. And so they always have that option. There used to be something in Denmark called text TV, where you could actually read everything online, and you could book trips and make reservations of hotels online, so that people who were hard of hearing or didn't really have anything but a simple TV, they could see it. Yeah. So that's why there are many series with Danish subtitles. It's great practice.
Great.
Okay. Yes, Annette.
Well, you asked about if we found this book funny. I thought it was extremely funny. I liked her a lot. I don't want her as my friend. I had a friend very much like this at one point. And I mean, she said whatever came into her mind. She was very witty. She was, sharp and could come back to people that, were really funny, but a little harsh. And I felt that way about her, that, well, it was a lot of fun to stand back and watch her. I didn't want to be at that meeting where she got up after her husband got that Golden Age award or whatever it was. And she, shouted out what she shouted out. I would find it, and that's probably my personality, but I would find it embarrassing to be with her, just as I found it embarrassing to be with my friends. So the book was kind of funny in that I laughed, but I had to laugh standing back.
Oh,
Interesting. Yeah. But Annette, I had a lot of experiences as the first time I was here and teaching at a university, and I would say something and my students would look at me and say, now tell me what you really mean. And I thought, so it took me a while to get used to that expression. And finally I'd say to the students, don't you expect me to be direct? I mean, that is the Danishness, right? And that's what she's doing. And her husband is the one who's kind of mellowing out a little bit and being nice about it and saying, now come on, you know how to behave in this society. So I think it's a very, very cultural difference that the author is showing us here.
yeah, I had to learn to tone it down because there was a wonderful line where I think it's her driving instructor, or maybe it's, and it says to her, you suffer from free-floating association. And I do. So I just have to learn to shut up sometimes, so we couldn't be friends. I'm sorry. I would embarrass you all.
Suzanne, what were you going to say?
My
You
loss.
you mentioned her husband, and remember, he was not her husband. Why was it so important? She kept saying too, he's not my husband, or other people said, he's not my husband, Did he ever get a name? I don't know. I don't remember.
She?
Did she?
Yeah.
She doesn't have a name?
We
The
don't.
child got a name after a year and a half, but we don't know what it is.
We
right?
don't know. But
Why
she
is
was called
this?
Dolph in the book, DOLPH, dolphin or whatever, I don't know. He was not named. And yes, you're right. It was important for her to ascertain her independence. He's my boyfriend. We're not married. The child is not going to be baptized. And of course, that's the new trend. You could say that she's riding on that wave. No, we're not baptizing our kids. We're not really members of the state church, even though it still has about 80% of the population. But you can.
We're not even naming our child. So there. Yeah.
Because that would, freeze him in time somehow or something, or curtail him, or he couldn't, or it would be too difficult to get songs to rhyme with his name or whatever, when you do the birthday songs and all that sort of stuff. I also I have a bone to pick about the talk about occasional songs. I really think that the term occasional song was not a good translation at all. I'm thinking about these songs that people compose to well-known melodies and that they sing on important occasions, important special occasions. That's what it is. It's not an occasional song. It doesn't happen every once in a while. It happens on very important occasions.
I agree, Suzanne. It should be called Songs for Special Occasions because you write them. I mean, I've written a number of those songs because people found out I could write them. So, could you do one for a confirmation? Oh, I have a silver wedding coming up. Now, please write something. And then they'll tell you everything about the persons and you put it together and it rhymes and then everybody's happy. So yeah, those are very popular still at those more formal occasions, not at a regular dinner party. You wouldn't be standing up singing an occasional or a song for an occasion there. But yes. So you had a bone to pick with, yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, I think there are certain aspects of the translations, the trailing spouses.
Yes.
They're appendixes. And I like that. You're an appendix. And that's it.
Danish, it's called appendix.
That's the translation, the direct translation, because you're nothing. She's a nobody. She's only making herself somebody in this folk high school. Her
And
husband
I'm
is
thinking,
everybody's
yeah.
yearning.
I'm thinking of a book I saw several years ago now that I learned a new term, and it was called Die Tünne Öl, the thin ear. And it was about trailing
beer.
spouses. So I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out whether there was a relationship there. And I had
Yeah.
never understood what the thin beer meant in English.
Oh,
The
okay.
beer at
So
the
that
end of
was,
the,
you know, the beer you have left when you made real beer, then there's thin beer left over. And here it's pawing. Pawing is something that's added like an appendix. And so it's a reason that a lot of people didn't want to get married. Nah, I don't want to be the appendix to my husband. I don't want to take my husband's name. You know, so she's certainly one of those. Tell me, what do you think about her problems with the driver's test and driving education? 85 classes, that's a lot of money. Oh, by the way, a regular driver's license in Denmark will cost you about 20,000 kroners, about $3,000.
Wow.
Just
Wow.
regular. Yes, it's expensive. So you try to take as few classes as possible and to pass as quickly as possible. You cannot be taught by parents, friends, anybody. You go to a specified driving
Really?
instructor, and that's it. And that's how they make a living.
Hmm.
This
Well,
is
I
cost
thought this
better
book was
drivers
very, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was wondering the whole time, are they better drivers in Denmark? Because I knew a woman from Germany that they had the same system. She said, I went to a driving instructor, and I said, well, how long does it take? And she said, essentially, it takes till the driver says you're safe to drive. So it sounds like,
Yeah, to take the test. Mhm.
so are they better drivers in Denmark? Because here I mean, a 14-year-old get a driver's license, which boggles my mind. And, you know, and we all make fun of, oh, this horrible drivers on the road, including me, you know, and all of that. But are they really better drivers there? Does it work better?
No, Susan. And one reason is the first thing my husband said when he moved to Denmark is, this is where the four-way stop would not work, because everybody would go. And he's right. So Linda, sorry.
Yeah, this book, in a way, almost confused me with Mirror, Shoulder, Signal by Dorothy Norris. And I was
Yes.
looking back at the books and the driving lessons, I was thinking, where were those 8 roundabouts? Was it in this book or that book? Or, you know, I mean, it must be a big issue driving in Denmark. And you're telling me it's $3,000 US dollars to get a driver's
Wow.
license. Now that's something else.
Yeah, that is.
But I think that what Stephen is saying, you know, the fear of driving and the attention, and that she's better than Dorte Norse, right? I mean, it seems like, but she's scared of dying. Her fear of dying, oh, if I go faster than 10 kilometers per hour, you know, like, or 10 miles per hour, then, and that's why I think the title of the book in Danish, meter per second, where she says, okay, it refers to the windmills, right? But it's called meter per second. And it can also be that you're driving so slowly that you have to kind of measure it in meters per second rather than kilometers per hour. So there's a funny ambiguity in that title.
Interesting. And you also asked if you thought that her challenges in the driving seat were allegorical. And I do think it's a lovely allegory really to life, that you know, Mona tells her, stop imagining catastrophes everywhere, and just this sense of being able to trust other people. So when you're on the road, you are putting your life in the hands of other people. And similar to then, you know, relationships, you have to trust that, yes, maybe your heart will get broken, but that's what you need to do to build a beautiful life.
Yeah.
And Cynthia, do you think she's worried about her boyfriend? Do you get a feeling about that?
Yes.
Worried about him in the sense of his safety?
No, losing him to those sprightly 18-year-old.
Oh,
Emma, who has a crush on him.
yes, there is the very hilarious ongoing, I don't know, underlying spat with Emma. I don't, I mean, I personally, as a reader, don't think there's any risk. And she keeps reminding Emma that he only spends time with you because he's being paid to spend time with you. And, but yeah, there clearly is a little bit of insecurity there. But I think that it was mostly just a humorous. I found it just very, very funny every time the two of them interacted.
I did too. And the reason I'm asking is that she stalks Anna's Aga, right? I mean, she really does. She runs into him just serendipitously here and there. And he finally says, quit stalking me. You know, this is weird. But her husband or boyfriend never questions it. So it's as if it's only her insecurity that we see, not his. He seems to be completely fine with everything and just kind of floating along and having a really good time at this folk high school. So that's also interesting that she is the woman is more who. And we also have to talk about her friends, you know, her Krise friend, the one who owns a hotel. I mean, she's an important part of her, right? And of course, the principal of the school. How do you see those women that are surrounding her? Do you see that they're an influence? Are they interesting? How does she use them? How does she relate to them? What do you think?
Well, I think isn't there something, I don't remember exactly what it was, that when you're in a small place like that, you make friends kind of at because of proximity, because there are not that many people around, and you in fact end up marrying people because of proximity, because there are not many people around. So it made me wonder if she would be friends with them if she were in Copenhagen or something, you know.
That is the big question. She wants desperately to be friends with them.
Yes.
And they say, oh, just take it easy, you know, there's no rush here. Maybe we'll be friends later on. So what do you think about that? Why does she so want friends? And she wants them to like her and want to be with her.
Because that's how she finds a place. That is her entry to community. She's the stranger, she's the newcomer, she's not a faculty member like her partner. She doesn't have a place. And I mean, the very first paragraph is the you know, principal, or first chapter is the principal trying to invent a place for her, like, okay, you can write the advice column. And so, you know, she has to create a new community because she's not from there. And, you know, and as someone who grew up as a city girl and have lived in progressively smaller communities through my adult life, you are never a native. You are never from there. And the urge to like figure out who's gonna be my friend, because you're not from there. That's like the security of knowing that you will belong somehow.
Exactly. Yeah. And you kind of have to form an affinity group. You know, I was lucky. I mean, I lived out in the country, kind of between two small towns. And it's like you have to find, like the principal had to find a function for her, and I had to find a group of people with similar interests. And as you say, I did the same thing, progressively smaller towns. So yeah. But what I found interesting is when she gave advice, she came across as very confident. I mean, people are giving her these really serious problems for them, real big life issues. And her advice is good, but it takes an amazing amount of confidence, especially for a woman who's like 32 years old, to give this really important advice that can have consequences. So she was a mixture of being self-conscious and insecure with being extremely confident. I found it a fascinating character trait.
Well, it's always easier to solve other people's problems.
Okay,
No,
yeah, that's very good.
not always. The funny thing is she always starts, or several times she starts with, now this is not about me.
But
Yes.
Yeah.
And that but I really liked, because I thought, yeah, when you give advice, like you're saying, Tova, you're projecting your own reality, right, to others. So, well, was it sound advice or was it just flippant advice? I mean, you thought it was profound, Susan. You too, Stephen. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought
Very
it was
thoughtful.
reasonable advice.
I'm sorry, Elizabeth, did you say something?
No, I mean, I thought a lot of it was very sound, especially then later on when she was saying, look at how he treats the service individuals, once she wanted to know how she could weed out men before they broke her heart. And
Yeah.
and I thought, she's absolutely right. And then a few pages later, somebody else says, well, when they're commenting on the column, he says, well, I liked your advice to the wait about the waiter. And what was it? The taxi cab driver. I had to laugh out loud when she's talking about her revenge fantasies, that when the kid is 16, and he's been out drinking, she's gonna ring a gong in the room. I mean, some of this stuff was so hilarious. I'm sitting here and somebody was asking, what are you reading? Because there were some really great lines. So
I also liked it when she said, okay, don't think about what a person is like to marry, but what a person is like to divorce.
yeah.
That was pretty, that was astute. Did you think that sleep was, I mean, taking up too much of the focus though, because she talked so much about being tired and sleepy and the baby keeping them awake. And at some point I thought, come on, just do some sleep training or something. Well, do something, I don't know, was that just me who felt that she was milking that a little bit too much? Annette?
Well, I thought a big part of the humor in this book for me was becoming a parent and the first year of that child's life. And I mean, when you mentioned the revenge fantasies and, when you finally get away and you finally get that babysitter and you go out to eat and you sit there and talk about that kid for the entire time. I mean, those were all things that I totally related to and had not really thought about for 47 years. So it was, I found that to be some of the funniest parts of the book. And now I just forgot where I was going. It was going to be an answer to the question that you had before, but it had to do with the humor of
saying is being sleep deprived, an explanation for her behavior.
Oh, yes. Well,
Sure.
I mean, isn't that one of the things that you do think about that first year of life, because you're not getting any sleep. And so
Right.
it does become a part. I can remember long conversations with friends of, well, how do you get them to take a nap? My son goes down for 10 minutes tops. I mean, those were our conversations. So to me, it seemed very realistic to spend all that time on sleep. Maybe it's not so important to me now, but if I'd been reading this that first year, I probably would have thought this was the greatest book ever written, because it was just, it made light of what to me at the time didn't seem very funny.
What we only have, okay, I gotta find the end. I was going to go to the very last page where she has that amazing speech to the graduates from the school, right? I was just going to ask you finally what you thought about that, because that's where she's talking as an older person, and what is she, beginning of 30s, and she's sounding so experienced and just solid. And we know that she's very sleep deprived and weird and all over the place. So what did you think about that? It's comfortable to get older, but life also gets less dangerous. Did you find any of that advice applicable to your lives and your situation, or advice or statements or whatever you call it?
I think having a kid is very dangerous. I mean, to take on that responsibility and to never the rest of your life, if you think about your kid, do you ever have a moment's peace if you have your child on your mind, even if the kid's 30 years old? I mean, you still, you worry about them. So I don't know if I quite agree that life gets more tame. I really don't think it does. I think that's one of the few places where I disagree with her. I don't think life gets more tame.
I laughed just because I thought if I were sitting in the audience and this was my graduation speech, she says, when the lobes of your brain finish growing together in a few years, you're going to understand what it's all about. You think youth is a character trait, but we have a secret. You're going to get old and basically, you know, and then she does talk a little bit about it's peaceful in your old age. But I thought, oh gosh, there's not much inspiration in that graduation speech.
No, because like Stephen is saying, I don't think life becomes less dangerous. I think we learn to manage it better. But of course, she's not focusing on the calm management of your life. She's focusing on the fact that, hey, you'll wake up one day and be old and have a child that'll be dangerous and ruin your sleep and so on. So yeah. So she says, you think that youth is a characteristic. You're walking around in each other's dreams, and go back to where I started. This is actually the purpose of the folk high school, to share each other's dreams, right? And it seems from her description, in spite of her satire, in spite of her irony and sarcasm, that has actually been accomplished with this group of students. And I hope that you also take that with you from the book, that there is that serious aspect of, yes, these kids got to know each other and they did a lot of wonderful things together and had that community that is so important, that is the foundation of this Danish folk high school institution. So we can laugh at that, and that's why the final speech is a great place to stop, because yeah, they're getting older, but they have this is in their baggage, right? They can carry it with them.
I think
All right, who wants to have the last word, Susan?
Yeah, no, I think our grandparents were very much older than we are at the same age. I mean, even if you look at photographs from like the 1950s,
Yeah.
high school graduating students look like they're 45 years old, you know, and it's like, you know, grandmothers dressed in grandmother shoes and grandmother clothes, and now they don't. You know, you wear you know, Skechers or whatever, and you know, whatever. It's just, we're younger than our grandparents were at the same age, I think. I love it.
That's a great way to end. Let's stay young forever, right?
Yeah.
And Steve, you have to fix your microphone, really. You will. Thank you, everybody, so much. It's just so delightful to be with you and hear your thoughts and conversation here. I so enjoy it. And next time, so this was a very short book. Next time it's a little bit longer, but it's a crime story. And I promise that you can't put it down. I read it, and I'm going to reread it, and I'll try to get the questions out really quickly. And I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we will meet in the new year. And
Good year. Good year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Glædelig jul. Glædelig jul og godt nytår. Thank you so much.